We do find that Chinese respondents in our survey are particularly optimistic, with more than 10% expecting at least 10% increase in exports this year, 45% expecting at least 5%, which is also higher than what we see in other countries in our survey. So it seems indeed that Chinese exporters are more optimistic than others in our survey. Maybe it's also out of the fact that last year was a bad year when it comes to exports. Overall, we had a global trade recession. So that's why also we think that exporters, respondents in our survey are particularly optimistic, hoping to see a rebound this year. That being said, as you rightly pointed out, there are risks looming for the outlook this year, including geopolitical risks. And we are expecting a rebound in global trade this year, but maybe not as strong as what our respondents are saying.
So some of it could be low base effect, right? Some of it also could be a much more competitive Chinese currency or renminbi, right? How much of it is also the fact that despite some concerns about the U.S. economy, more concerns about Europe as well, for Chinese exporters, they know that if the end destination is either Europe or the U.S., their products can still get there, but through third countries.
Yeah, I think you touched upon several points. The lower prices, the lower currency from the Chinese exporters. It's true also since the end of last year, we've seen Chinese exporters trying to remain competitive on a cost basis by bringing down their prices to ensure market share, to ensure volume shipments. So that is likely to continue this year on the one hand. And on the other hand, as you said, right, maybe demand is not as good as they hoped for. Well, we do expect some sort of soft landing in the US and Europe for one thing. And the second thing is that Chinese exporters will try to maintain or maybe even increase their market share. In the US, it might be a bit more difficult given the geopolitical tensions and the tariffs that will be coming. But in Europe, we're seeing maybe more success, especially when it comes to electric vehicles.
I know it's 6 months to go to the US presidential election, but was there any visibility, Francoise, from respondents in this survey about how the global trade landscape could change after the election?
Well, it was rather interesting, actually. We did ask them precisely what kind of geopolitical factors could disrupt their trade outlook and disrupt their supply chains. And interestingly, only a quarter of respondents say that the US-China trade wars might have an impact. And only US exporters cited the US presidential election as the top factor that would impact them. So we were rather surprised by this result. But actually, when we zoom in on companies that have long supply chains, that have exposure in regions outside of their own, and for companies that have foreign production, more than half of the production abroad, for these companies, the top factor is definitely the US-China trade wars. So I would say that, yeah, exporters seem to be more optimistic this year, but they're still aware of potential risks coming from this.
Okay, are they even more optimistic, or is part of their optimism based on taking a look at demand from the global south for Chinese products?
You mean from emerging countries? Or?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have this specifically. We do see, for example, though, that companies, when they're looking at diversifying their supply chains, they're looking maybe more at the rest of Asia-Pacific, especially maybe companies that today have production sites and suppliers in China. They're not saying that they're going to leave China. Only 11% say they will decrease their footprint in China. But when asked about whether they could diversify and look for other production sites and other suppliers, at least a third of them said it will be in the rest of Asia-Pacific, with also a good focus on ASEAN.